Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to talk to you about the latest episode of Star Trek Picard. It was called 17 Seconds. And as it starts, the Titan is running from Vadic in the nebula as she calmly continues ordering her crew to fire on the Titan. In order to escape her and being unable to go to warp, not only because the nebula prevents it, but also because the warp coils take damage in the fight, they go deeper into the nebula so as to hide. Then we get a flashback to some time before when Riker's son was born. He and Picard are celebrating in the bar, and Riker is wearing yet another never-seen-before uniform. It drives me crazy. Anyway, Riker talks about it taking 17 seconds to get down to sickbay when he was urgently called there during the birth of his son, and how it was the longest 17 seconds of his life. But last time I checked, starships had site-to-site transporting inside their ships in the 24th century, which is when his kid was born. So what's that about? Anyway, they talk about how becoming a father changes your life and that you know you would burn the world to save your kid if you had to. Then Riker gets a holo call from Troy letting him know that she needs him to come back and help her look after their kid. Back on the Titan in the present, Ensign LaForge visits Commander Hansen in lockdown after having been sent to get some rest after having pulled a long shift along with her ops counterpart. She tells Seven that people didn't think she belonged in Starfleet either, but she assures Seven that she did the right thing by helping her friends. In sickbay, Beverly's trying to help some of the patients, to which the ship's doctor takes umbrage, at which point she says something about how she would have to explain everything that's changed in the last 20 years to Beverly, which, I don't know, doesn't make sense to me, because why wouldn't Beverly have kept up with this stuff? It's not like she was living like in a hut in the woods or something. Riker and Picard show up at sickbay, and Riker takes Jack away so the other two can talk. And they argue more than talk, but Beverly explains that she indeed had Jack 20 years earlier, and that the reason she never told him was because he was always in danger, and she didn't want to put Jack in danger, which, you know, makes sense. But Picard's pissed because he says she should have told him and allowed him to choose whether or not he would have even continued in Starfleet. And when she points out that she never thought he would ever have chosen that, with good reason, he says she should have at least allowed him to decide rather than make the biggest decision of his life for him, and I think he's right. But then she counters that by saying he had always told her he never wanted a family because he didn't want to become his father, but that seems to contradict the sentiments that he expressed in Generations, that he regretted not having a family.
I've come to feel that Renee was as close as I would get to having a child of my own.
Love you, Father. Were you scared? Look at the tree. I helped decorate it.
It took all day.
Say Merry Christmas, Papa. See the presents? I love you, Father.
I love you.
Come on, children, let's move back and give your father some room.
I know. What's going on? Why am I here?
You're in the Nexus.
This is the Nexus.
For you, this is what you wanted.
Papa, thank you for the doll. She's very beautiful.
These are my children. These are my children.
So, what are they doing? Next, Riker and Jack talk about various things in the hallway, but I can't say that any of it was substantive. Then, back in sickbay, as Beverly and Picard prepare to go back to the bridge, she tells him that she told Jack who his father was at a certain point and encouraged him to seek him out, but that Jack just never chose to. Picard and Riker then regroup and head to the bridge as the Shriek finds them and begins firing on the Titan, whilst noting that it's right where it should be, which is interesting. Captain Shaw is hurt pretty bad in the jostling, and he blames Picard and Riker for getting them into the situation, and then transfers command to Riker, telling him that he and Picard are going to have to get them out of the situation, as he's taken off to sickbay pretty badly wounded. Then they fire a torpedo and blast it with the phasers just ahead of the Shriek, and the explosion blows it away from them. Then we join Raffi as she wakes up on her ship, having been incapacitated at the end of the previous episode, and she finds Worf practicing with his bat'leth to opera music. He introduces himself, very interestingly, mentioning both the Duras family and Gowron.
I am Worf, son of Moog, House of Martok, son of Sergei, House of Roshenko, bane to the Duras family, slayer of Gowron.
He explains that he's not exactly in Starfleet, but some kind of subcontractor whose interests are aligned with Starfleet's. Apparently, Raffi's real name is Rafaela, which we learn when Worf tells her that there's also a human bad guy involved in all of this, and that he and she will hunt him down. And I'm guessing at this point that him being her handler, while not part of Starfleet, even though she's Starfleet intelligence, must be occurring because Starfleet must have delegated responsibility for her mission to him as a subcontractor, I guess. I don't know. Back in sickbay, Captain Shaw is bleeding internally, and he wonders out loud to Jack how it is that the enemy keeps finding them in the nebula. Next, for some reason, Ensign LaForge is back on the bridge, even though she was ordered to take rest, as is her ops counterpart. Very strange. The Shriek keeps firing some kind of device at the Titan that keeps portaling it back into the nebula every time they try to leave. It was very weird. Picard tells Riker that it's time to stand and fight rather than keep hiding in the nebula because the ship keeps getting hit with energy surges from the nebula, which seems to be alive to some extent, and that at some point they'll just be crippled by it, leaving them wide open to attack. But Riker continues to head into the nebula to try to hide. Meanwhile, Jack tries to get to the bridge, seemingly because he has some wisdom to impart as to how the enemy ship keeps finding them, which came to him when he was observing blood trails in sickbay while helping tend to the wounded, but he's prevented from going to the bridge by security. On Metalis Prime, Worf and Raffi are stalking the human they're trying to find. Worf catches up to him, grabs him, and basically suplexes him to the ground, and then tells Raffi that beheadings are on Wednesday. Back in the nebula, the Shriek keeps firing on the Titan. Jack visits Seven in her quarters and explains that the Shrike is probably continuing to find them because they're leaving a trail of some kind that's detectable by something other than sensors, such as a mass spectrometer, which isn't blinded by the nebula. Somehow Seven knew exactly what it was from this, which there could be a million things that it was, but she zeroed in on exactly what it was. It was kind of weird. Then, after Jack knocks out the guard keeping Seven in her quarters, the two of them go about trying to fix the leak that's causing the Shrike to be able to find them. It turns out that someone on board the ship deliberately caused the ship to leak the detectable substance and disabled the ship's internal sensors so that no one would be alerted to it. Picard and Riker argue over what they should do next, as Riker thinks they need to get the hell out of there, but Picard wants them to stand and fight and try to destroy the Shrike. Meanwhile, the ensign that everybody on YouTube suspected was up to something when he was first seen in the first episode was apparently the one up to no good, just as everyone suspected except me. And he seems to be some kind of changeling as he fights with Jack to prevent Jack from undoing what he's done. Worf and Raffi interrogate the human, but he's not forthcoming. And he also seems to be in withdrawal from drugs, which Raffi tries to use to her advantage. Back on the Titan, Jack is succumbing to exposure to the leak and seems to be having a weird vision. But Seven shows up and takes him to sickbay, and Picard takes the same 17-second turbolift ride down there to be with him. Once again, instead of transporting right there, like why? Anyway, Beverly's able to bring him back from near death while Picard watches. Back with Raffi and Worf, we see them get information out of the human, and it turns out that the theft of the portal weapon and the blaming of said theft on the Romulans was done to confuse Starfleet and keep them from learning about something even more dangerous. And they also discovered that the human is in fact a changeling, a member of the Founders from Deep Space Nine. On the Titan, Jack reports on his interaction with the changeling on the Titan, as said changeling plants a device somewhere on the ship. We then go back to Worf and Raffi, and even though Worf was seemingly not wise to the changeling being a changeling, it seems he should have been, because a friend of his within the link, who apparently was Odo, warned him about a rogue group within the Founders whom he suspects is planning a big attack against Starfleet, which seemed to come to him out of the blue somehow. So he knows about this thing, he's chasing people down, and then he doesn't immediately say, "Are you a changeling? I think you're a changeling." He just lets the scene play out. And then when it becomes obvious, he's like, oh, he's a changeling. So I don't know if that made sense to me. But anyway, when an explosion goes off on the Titan from the device and they can't go to warp, they try to attack the Shrike, but can't because it uses the portal weapon to turn the Titan's torpedoes back on itself and disables it to the point where it's sent cascading toward a gravity well within the nebula, at which point the Shrike departed for some reason. Riker then blames Picard for this and exiles him from the bridge, which is where the episode ended. So I thought that this episode was okay. There was some good stuff in it. I was glad, for example, for the explanation of where Jack comes from. I mean, we knew at the end of last episode he was Picard's son, but now we got more details as to when he was born and the circumstances surrounding that. And, you know, that sort of colored in some of the past about Picard and Beverly having had a relationship at some point after the events of Nemesis, which they entered into and exited out of multiple times before the final breakup. I think it makes sense that that occurred because there always seemed to be that extra thing between them. I think Jonathan Frakes did an excellent job. It was great to watch him playing Riker in command. I enjoyed seeing Michael Dorn as Worf. And I'm very intrigued by this plot involving the Founders. Even though I had said initially I was glad that it seemed like there wasn't some big earth-shattering plot afoot this season, and that maybe the plot of this season was going to be smaller. But I think this particular bigger plot isn't so big that it's ridiculous. I think it's more in line with the kind of plots that Star Trek's done before and done well. You know, like a conspiracy plot, an enemy from within plot, a very much realistic plot about political strife and war versus the stuff they were doing in the first two seasons, which was just, you know, universe-ending stuff that just seemed so overblown. Anyway, I also liked the way they're connecting the two different plots we've been following so far, the plot on the Titan and the plot with Raffi, in a way that makes sense and that works. They did a good job of connecting the two, so that's cool. They didn't always work everything into the same story before very well. At this time, they seem to be doing that. I did find some of the details in this episode to be clunky, though, and I didn't really like the whole confrontation thing between Riker and Picard. I really didn't like that. I'm still not sure how they're going to connect Geordi and Lore and Moriarty and how they're going to bring Troy into it, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. Also, we don't really know why Captain Vadic deliberately wanted the Titan to stay in the nebula and to get sucked into the gravity well, only to then take off. So I guess we'll find that out in a future episode as well. But that's really it. This episode was okay in that it didn't do anything incredibly dumb in terms of plot progression, though I do find myself quite annoyed by the fact that after insisting that ships had site-to-site internal transporter capability 10 years before Kirk, even though they didn't, they seem to have forgotten that by the 24th century and certainly into the 25th century, starships have that capability. So I don't know. I guess it's a dumb nitpick to draw out of the whole thing, but like the whole episode is called 17 Seconds, about the 17 seconds it takes to get from the bridge to sickbay on a turbolift. And it's like, no, it wouldn't take that long. It would take a second. So I don't know. That kind of annoys me. And, you know, if they're going to name the episode after that, like, it's pretty important, but it doesn't make sense that that's important or that it's even there because starships have site-to-site transporters. Why are they using them when they shouldn't be using them? Like on Discovery, at least the first 3 seasons or first 2 seasons, and Strange New Worlds, and not using them where they should be using them, which is on this show. I don't know. Anyway, that's it. I'll be back with a review of next week's episode once it's released. For now, I'm going to get out of here. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.